Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to our next webinar in the Cohesive's Maximo Back to Basics webinar series. Our aim for this webinar series is to highlight existing base Maximo functionality and features that your organization may not be using today to help you maximize your return on investment. In this webinar, you will discover how Maximo's Management of Change application provides a systematic approach to managing organizational change, especially for facilities and operations with evolving practices and processes. Note that this webinar will be recorded and distributed post-webinar. All the attendees are currently set to listen-only mode, but feel free to post any questions or comments in the chat or question box. Should you have any technical questions or problems, please log in with the GoToWebinar technical team in the form of a question mark or help section of the panel itself. I will be handing it over to the host in a bit, but let me do a quick introduction of Cohesive. Cohesive helps owners operate embedded digital ways of working that drive operational efficiency and enhance asset performance across all stages of the life cycle. We at Cohesive draw core tech solutions to support our clients. These solutions include Bentley's Infrastructure Cloud iTwin and IBM Maximo, for which Cohesive is the largest implementer. And without further ado, let's dive in and hand you over to our host, Samantha Chow.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha Chow. I'm based out of Calgary, and I've been with Cohesive for a little over 5 years now. I'm also joined today by Kate Showalter, a Director of Services within Cohesive, and she is also our resident MOC expert. I've worked in both a technical and a functional role across a variety of projects. Prior to Cohesive, I've worked in oil and gas, where I was a support analyst supporting multiple Maximo environments. And later on, I did decide to just hop on over to the consulting side. I'm very familiar with the different implementations that span across Maximo, like upgrades, new deployments, and enhancements. But like Shannon said, today's webinar's topic is going to be on management of change, aka MOC. Okay. So the agenda for today includes an introduction to management of change and what it is, the need for management of change, what the difference is between an MOC request and an MOC, what the MOC process looks like in Maximo Manage, and a quick demo of what this looks like in Manage, and lastly, a Q&A. Right, so what does an MOC stand for? An MOC stands for Management of Change, which is a structured approach to transitioning from a current state to a future state. And with that, you're able to evaluate, authorize, and document any changes before they're made. You also want to ensure that those changes do not affect the system's integrity. MOCs do not necessarily mean a change to only equipment, but it can be a change to your process, your personnel, facilities, operations, and documentation. So some examples of these changes include alterations to the original design specs of the equipment, process modifications, changes in operating conditions outside of the approved range. So for example, your pressure, your temperature, your flow rate, any adjustments to your critical activities, again, personnel changes, or even shifts in the organizational structure. So based on the examples above, you can see that the scope extends beyond equipment changes. It can literally affect anything. Another example is there could be changes in the way activities are done, such as activities related to engineering, operations, inspection, and maintenance. MOCs do help ensure that risks are tracked and managed when the change is made, and that any mitigation that might need to be done is also made. So whether it's a permanent or a temporary change, an MOC can be applied during the different phases, such as it can be applied during the design, the construction, installation, operation, as well as it can also be applied to maintenance adjustments, or it can be applied during the decommissioning of the facilities or pressure components. An example of a temporary change could be if you can't replace the equipment right away and there's a lead time of 6 months, then you need something to be put in place temporarily, which will result in the need for an MOC. So an MOC procedure typically includes several key steps, starting with a detailed process from the beginning to the end. It helps you define what is a change and what qualifies as a replacement in kind. So for example, a replacement in kind involves substituting the equipment or procedures with similar items. If a part is replaced by another manufacturer with identical specs, it's considered a replacement in kind. However, if an analysis is required for that new part because of these changing specs, then it would fall under a management of change. So your procedure should also encompass technical information, potential impacts of the change, including risk assessments. Management of changes should also include proper authorization, either through a review process, a change approval board, or an authorization procedure. MOCs should also assign personnel to approve or handle various tasks related to the MOC. And additionally, you should also have a process to track your action items. So why is an MOC needed? Well, because they're generally required by a regulator or a law in many industries, or they might be required depending on the asset. So for example, here in Alberta, we have regulations that mandate a change management process around pressure equipment. And these pressure equipment can include things like fittings, boilers, pressure vessels, and this process is outlined by the ABSA guidelines. MLCs are beneficial in that it enhances your system integrity by ensuring all elements are accurately tracked and managed. An advantage of using MLCs within Maximo Manage is that it integrates your work management and your change management process within a single application. It allows you to track the work that is being done in the MLC record, and it allows you to track the associate costs to the work. An MLC facilitates a bad actor review by tracking previous deferrals or failures at its location over a specified period. By looking at this history, we can identify any recurring issues, determine if the same solution has been repeatedly applied, and if it did it actually fix the problem? But it can also detect any repeated failures that we can address. Lastly, another advantage of using MLC within Manage is that it helps maintain a consistent electronic process for that change management, which again can be integrated with your work management process. Okay, so before I head into the demo and show you what the applications look like, I'd like to go over some brief differences between an MLC request and an MLC within Manage. MLC requests are used to identify potential changes, and they're quite similar to service requests. It serves the same purpose as a service request in that it captures the initial information and validates that whatever change is being proposed is valid before proceeding. MLC requests don't require license entitlements and they don't utilize the app points pool. An MLC request process may include initiating that management of change request, a review process of the MLC request itself, and have the request approved before it actually turns into an MOC. And then once an MOC is created, that's when you can initiate the full change management process. On the other hand, MOCs are used to formally manage these permanent or temporary changes that, again, can impact anything, your process, personnel, facilities, operations, and even documentation. Out-of-the-box MOCs within Maximo Manage can, again, be integrated with work management, which allows you to track everything, your work and your costs being done. Utilizing the MOC functionality will also help enable communication between different groups. And lastly, the MOC application does manage the entire change process from initiation to review to approval, authorization, and lastly, closure. Okay, so what would a typical MOC process look like in Maximo Manage? So it does include a variety of stages, but usually it would start off with a change request, which is then followed by a risk assessment and a cost assessment of what this change involves. The risk assessment is kind of like the planning of the work order. So what kinds of things do you need to do to mitigate the risks? So you'll need to list everything before it goes to review and approval. At the review and approval stage, it would be up to your organization's process to identify the appropriate individuals to do this. Many companies typically have a change approval board, which consists of a group of individuals who meet every so often to discuss and decide on the approval of these proposed changes. Part of the process also involves pre-start actions, and these are actions that must be taken before the change can begin. Next, we have our authorization to start, which is required to verify that the pre-start actions have been completed and that any applicable documentation has been updated accordingly. Next, we have our pre-start safety review, which is also known as a PSSR. And this helps verify that all safety actions have been completed and they've been adhered to. Next, we have our post-start actions, and these are actions that need to be taken after the MOC process has begun or completed. Lastly, we have our closure process, which involves anything like updating all documentation, ensuring that everything is in order, providing training, and handing off to the end user. So the life cycle of the MOC process would be managed by utilizing the statuses that is configured through workflow. So as shown above, your standard, like this standard MOC process can be configured based on your organization's requirements. Each client is different, as everyone has different needs. The inclusion or exclusion of certain stages is controlled by workflow and configurations within Maximo Manage. And so by doing so and by keeping track of this and manage, it does help you ensure compliance, and it helps maintain a comprehensive audit trail. Okay, so I will head into the demo here. Let me share. All right. So I am logged into Maximo Manage already. So I just want to show you where the applications are. So if you click on the change module, you'll see both the MOC request and the MOC application. These are both included with the HSE add-on and the oil and gas industry add-on. So you have your MOC requests, which again can be thought of as a counterpart to the service request. They're used to capture your initial details like your scope, your justification, your assets, locations, and any required timelines. And then the other one, you have your MOC, which involves more of the in-depth processes, and it would involve your specific tasks like your assignment of actions and your review and approval. So we're going to start off with the MOC request application. So for the purpose of this demo, I have already created and drafted a record. So with this application, you're going to see pretty much an almost mirrored image of it in the MLC application, which we will get into afterwards. But here the user would come in and enter in a change that they want to make. So in this case, an operator has submitted a request to reduce the operating pressure of a gas pipeline. You'll note that the requested by was auto-populated with that requester's name. So in this case, I am the operator. A typical common part of the process is having a MOC request reviewer. So this is someone who would come in to review the request, and they'll either approve, reject, or maybe even cancel the MOC request. But usually before it gets turned into an MOC, you'll have this reviewer. Okay. So you'll note here that the MOC request can be related to a lot of things and not just to the asset and the location, but you can also reference your items, your PMs, and your job plans. The reason for this is that with PMs and job plans, you might be changing the way maintenance is done, how often it's done, and whether you need to change the process for maintenance, in which case you might be changing your job plan. So for example, you might have a deferral maintenance, which is a change that would stem an MOC. You can then associate the PM to it and just see and analyze any of the risks associated to the asset. So with the MOC request, like I mentioned, there will always be some form of a review process. So in this case, we have Fred, who is the reviewer. And typically you would have a workflow associated to the request, where as the requested by, once I submit the record, it's going to get routed to the reviewer, who would get a notification of some sort, whether it's through an email and or when they log into Maximo and they have a start center set up, they can access the record that way. So as the operator, I've created this request. I've associated the gas pipeline that the change is being submitted for. We'll call it the Silver Stream gas pipeline. Next, I did associate an operating procedure. And what this operating procedure is, it gives a set of instructions that explains how to operate the pipeline. It's used across the board to ensure that everyone follows the same steps, reducing any errors and improving efficiency. You can also look at an operating procedure as like a job plan, where a job plan includes a list of tasks that needs to be done on a given work order. So for in scope, I kept it simple. And the scope is, again, reducing the pressure on a gas pipeline. For justification, I wrote that this is due to signs of potential wall thinning. In the dates section, I've also noted, when do we expect to start and finish the work and the request? And when do we require it by? And when was this requested? So, sorry. So it's pretty straightforward. But next I do want to show the log tab. So this tab is pretty common in a lot of applications. It's also quite straightforward, but this is where you can enter in additional information or reasons pertaining to either approving the request, or if you're rejecting it, maybe you want to add some additional information here, or maybe you want more uh, information from the requester. So you could go ahead and add that here. Basically, any information that you think is deemed relevant to track, you can just add it here. So for this example, I've created a log saying that the change approval board basically already reviewed and they approved this request. Okay, so again, if there was workflow associated to this, once I route the record forward to Fred, he's going to get that notification. He's going to log in to Maximo Manage, and he's going to go to the MOC request. So he's going to take a look at the request, and he's going to say, yep, everything looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and approve it. As part of the business process request, there might be a requirement to automatically create the MOC upon that approval, which can be done via workflow. So for this demo, I have already created an MOC via the create action. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, so we are under the related records tab here. So any MOCs, any work orders or service requests that get created or they stem from this request, they will get captured here in the related records tab. So once Fred has approved this request, the status will get updated to approved. So for now, I will go ahead and navigate to the MOC application. Okay. So here, this is where the bulk of the work and I guess the magic is going to happen. So you'll notice that on the first tab, the MOC tab, all of this information looks very familiar because it got carried over from the MOC request. But something I'd like to point out is the template checkbox here. So if there are any recurring changes such as equipment replacements, this is where it would be handy to have an MOC template. This MOC template would contain like common information, something that information that would get reused over and over again. So for example, your reviewers and approvers might be the same. You might have the same pre-start, post-start actions, and even the same PSSR checklist. This just helps save time and allows users to quickly generate new MOCs. Template MOCs do not trigger any workflow or notifications because, again, they are meant to be served as a template. Some clients might treat the MOC as the request itself because the person who is entering in the information might be someone who has a higher degree of technical knowledge. So for example, it might be the engineer who creates the MOC right off the bat because they already know what needs to be done and they have all of the relevant information to populate the record. Okay, so as we scroll down, again, you'll see that a lot of this information just came from the request itself. So when an MOC is created, there is typically an MOC owner and this person is the one driving the overall process. And as part of that, they are responsible for setting up the MLC record, going through every single tab, identifying the background information, and just basically prepping the record for the full MLC process. So in the project and risks tab here, the MLC owner will start looking at assessing the risk and seeing if there are any costs associated to the MLC. This information is all captured here. For this demo, I did create a risk assessment, but typically clients have their own internal risk assessment matrix to determine the consequence, the likelihood, and the risks. Recognizing the costs and the risks tied to the MLC is a pretty key factor in gaining approval. So with the review and approve tab, this is where we would identify the reviewers and the approvers. So as I mentioned earlier, an organization might have some sort of a change approval board that would include these individuals who are going to review the MLCs and approve them. However, some clients might have a certain level of technical review or approval, which might be a bit broader than the change approval board. So therefore, they may need their reviewers and approvers to be subject matter experts and or those who have a certain level of spending authority. So as the MLC owner, I identified both Mike and Roland as the approvers, as the reviewers. As the approvers, I have both Rebecca and Fred. So at the stage, the MLC is routed to the reviewers who are going to come in. They're going to take a look at the whole MLC record. They're going to go through every single tab. And if everything looks good, they're going to go ahead and sign off by checking off the review checkbox. The sign-off date will also auto-populate. This does give you a bit of a good audit trail too. And any additional comments that they want to make, they can make here in the comments text box. So once the reviewers have both signed off on the MLC, they're going to go ahead and route this record forward, in which case it's going to be assigned to the approvers. So both Rebecca and Fred are going to go in, and just like the reviewers, they're going to go ahead and take a look at the MLC record, look at all of the information that's been populated so far. And if everything looks good, they're going to go ahead and approve it and sign off on this. So at this point, the MLC owner has already obtained the approval, so we're ready to kick off the training and the pre-start actions. The training tab here allows you to specify if there's any training required for the MLC and who might actually need this training. So for this particular case, we might be looking at pipeline operators and pipeline maintenance workers as the attendees. In this case, because we are looking to reduce the operating pressure, we're going to need to ensure that there's some training to make sure that this work is being done in a safe manner. So we have a training course called the Pipeline Safety Training, and this course is going to go over wearing proper PPE, how to verify that the work is being done in a safe environment, where to access the operating procedures, emergency measures, and the appropriate contact information. I've marked it as required, and I've added in a few participants. So here you can add in both internal and external attendees. So internal meaning they could be employees of the organization, but basically they would also be people who have person records within Maximo Manage. Additionally, you can also add external participants, and these can be your contractors, in which case you can go ahead and just enter in their name. And the minute you tab out, this external participant checkbox will automatically get checked off. Okay. So as a MOC owner, I've verified that the training is done. So, and that all of the participants who have attended have also completed the training as well. So we're ready to go ahead and assign the pre-start actions. So again, pre-start actions are just common actions that need to be done before starting the work. These actions can depend on the MOC type or what type of change is being made. Some prefer to leave it as a big list and leave it to the engineer to determine what needs to be completed or not completed. You can assign these actions to an individual or to a group of people. You can select your actions by going to Actions and select MOC actions, in which case you can select one or multiple actions. Alternatively, if you have a group of common actions, you can create a group for these actions. And then instead of selecting the individual actions, you would just select your action group, in which case it'll populate all of your actions here. Okay, so at this stage, we need our pre-start actions to be completed. So our action assignees are going to go and complete their actions. Then they're going to come in to Maximo Manage and they're going to sign off and say, yep, I've already completed my actions. And if there are any additional comments that they want to add, they can do so here. Okay, so once all actions have been completed, the MOC owner might come in and validate the completion of these actions and also the training. And from there, they would begin on working on getting the approval for the authorization to start. So the authorization to start process is very similar to the review and approval process in that the authorizer would do another validation check on the MOC record by coming in, reviewing the record, going through every single tab, validating the information, and maybe if there's any documentation that needs to be added, they can go ahead and do that. But if everything looks good, as the authorizer, Fred would come in and he would sign off on it. And here we can see that Fred has added in some comments. Documentation and drawings have been reviewed and everything looks good. Pre-start actions have been reviewed and completed. We are good to continue with it. So now that the record has been authorized, we are good to head on over to the PSSR or the pre-start safety review. Okay, so we're essentially ready to start the work, but have we considered the safety implications? The PSSR is designed to identify and mitigate potential hazards and risks associated with either the equipment or processes prior to startup. This helps to ensure that the work is safe to continue and that any changes that were made were properly reviewed and updated. So as the PSSR action assignees, I'm going to go and complete my actions. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to sign off and say, yep, this is good. So I'm going to answer the questions. It's either yes or no, or is it not applicable? So once I answer it, I can go ahead and complete and sign off on it. So again, PSSR actions, these can be assigned to an individual or to a group of individuals. And as part of the pre-start safety review, you might have a PSSR reviewer. In this case, we have Alan. And what Alan is going to do is he's just going to verify that all of the PSSR actions have indeed been completed and that they have been answered. So if Alan sees, there's no issues, this is like we're ready to move ahead, he's going to go in and route the record forward. So in this case, um, the work is ready to be started. So the MLC owner will go in and confirm that we have the authorization to start and that the PSSR actions have been completed. So at this stage, they would tell the planners that the work can be initiated. So at this stage, we will most likely have a work order because we need someone to actually go out and do the work. So we have our work order here. Um, the MLC owner gave the thumbs up. The work is ready to be started. So at this stage, the work order is moved to in progress to indicate that the work is currently being done. Um, at, at which point the MOC might also be moved to in progress as well. So now the work is done. The work has been completed. Um, so at this point, the MLC owner verifies that the completion of work is done. And so we're ready to initiate the post-start actions. But also something else to note too is that any costs related to the work, like your costs associated to um, your labor, your services, and your tools are all going to be captured here on the work order. Okay. Um, so at this stage, the work has been completed. We have our post-start actions that we need to work on. And so post-start actions, again, are kind of similar to the pre-start actions, except that they are done after the work has been completed. So as the post-start action assignee, I'm going to go and do my actions. Then I come in to manage and I go and I sign off on my actions. And any additional comments, I can go ahead and mark them here. So at this stage, the MLC owner would validate the completion of the post-start actions, and they would go ahead and move the MLC into completion status. Okay, so lastly, we have the closure step. At this step, there would usually be an individual who does a closure review, and they can be identified here. So we have Samuel, who is our closure reviewer. But it could also be the MLC owner too, as they are responsible for initiating this whole process. So at the closure stage, we want to ensure that all post-start actions have been completed. If they have been, you'll note that this checkbox has been automatically checked off. They will also determine, are there any after action reviews that are required, any lessons learned, are there any documentation that's been attached, any improvements that are required. A common configuration is making this documentation attached required. So maybe an organization requires that there must be something attached before we can close out the MLC. Another common configuration is making the closure comments required, just ensuring that there is some sort of comment to indicate that we've identified that the MLC has been completed and that any closure actions or any documentation have been completed and added. Speaking of closure actions, there might be additional items that need to be done. So for example, in this case, I've completed my P&ID drawings, I've revised them. I've also revised my process flow diagram as well. And just making sure that there's nothing else outlying. But yeah, so as the action assignees, once I've completed and I've signed off on my actions, the closure reviewer is going to go and review everything once more. If everything is good, they will go ahead and close out the MOC. So once they route the record forward, this record will get updated to close. Okay, with the log tab, again, this is pretty much identical to the MLC request application. Any information here, so if the reviewers and approvers need to reject the MLC, they can go ahead and add in a work log here indicating why they've approved it. Maybe they need additional information, maybe there's just some missing pre-start actions, or we need additional training. In this case, the MLC request, the log that I created on there did also carry over. So anything that was created on the MLC request, you will see it here. Okay, and then that's it. That's all I have for the demo. So now we can hop on over to the Q&A. So let me pop open my presentation.
Great. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. We do have a few questions. And Kate's on as well. What are some common use cases for MOC?
So probably the most common one, which Sam alluded to in the presentation, is any regulatory requirements that need to be met. So things like changes to pressure vessels generally have regulatory requirements associated with them that need to be addressed and tracked via a change management process. Some other common use cases for change management in Maximo are just any general engineering change management requirements. You can also actually use it in Maximo to track changes to job plans or PM schedules or track PM deferrals. So it doesn't really need to be limited to just engineering design changes. You can use it for quite a bit in Maximo.
Wonderful. And just to point out, Sam is having some technical difficulties with her camera.
Oh
She
no,
does exist. She does
I
exist,
didn't
everybody.
realize.
She's just invisible right now. Um,
Oh no.
it's okay. But just so everybody knows that that is what's going on right now. Not a big deal at all. But we'll keep going with questions. Is it necessary to use workflow even if the MOC is small in scope?
So I don't know if I would say it's 100% necessary if your MOC process is sufficiently small, but I would say that it's recommended. So the workflow process will let you pull in any requirements that are associated with the MOC process that you've defined at your company and make sure that all of those requirements are met as part of the process. Whereas if you don't implement a workflow, you're kind of relying on your paper process and ensuring that everyone is getting everything right. The workflow allows a little more system enforcement, a little more notifying people, escalating approvals that are taking too long, that kind of thing. So I would say highly beneficial generally.
Wonderful. Let me see. If you have any other questions, please go ahead and submit them in the chat. We've got one more in there. What is the benefit of MOC in Maximo compared to other tools?
Excuse me. So within Maximo, number one, it's built right into your enterprise asset management system, so you can use it to easily track assets that are being bad actors. So if there's continual changes against the same asset, is this presenting an issue with this asset? I did also mention that you've got the ability to tie it into your job planning, so changing any of your job plans and the procedures associated with them. And you also have the ability to tie it in with your preventive maintenance module. So it's just for ease of use, you can, track straight to a specific PM record. Hey, we need a deferral on this, or hey, we need to change the maintenance schedule for this. So it just more tightly integrates with your work management and asset management use cases.
Wonderful. That, unless anybody asks any more questions, you can go ahead and submit. Oh, I see one question just popped in, so sorry. How does MOC differ from simply, oh, hold on, I gotta click into it. How does MOC differ from simply writing several WOs to complete the same task?
So the main thing I would say is the approval process. So basically, MOC it tightens up the approval and review process in a way that you'd have to do a lot more build out in the work order module, and you'd also have to do a lot more build out in a way that distinguishes, an MOC work order from just a typical work order. So that separation kind of gives you a bit more flexibility. And there are a lot more MOC focused tools like the, PSSR tab, training tab, that kind of thing that are built into the MOC app that aren't built into the work order tracking app.
Wonderful. All right. I think that's all the questions. Give a second.
Sorry
All
about
right.
that. I didn't
No,
realize.
you're fine, Sam. You're fine.
Hilarious.
It's a beautiful background. All right. Well, with that, we'll conclude today's webinar. I want to thank our speakers for joining us today, as well as you attendees for listening to us today. Note that we have all of our previous webinars available on YouTube. The recording of this webinar will also be made available to you on our channel. And with that, that is the end of our presentation. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.